Good morning. Thank you for joining us for our Talent Management Breakfast Club event from 2022 to Future Ready. I'm Ashley St. John, Talent Management's Editor-in-Chief, and I am so pleased to kick off today's discussion with our great panel of speakers. I'd like to thank our sponsor of today's event, Sounding Board. Sounding Board enables and scales complex leadership coaching programs with a scientifically designed coaching management platform and a curated network of leadership coaches. We are so thankful for your partnership and your support of our Breakfast Club event today. We will kick off our panel discussion for the day momentarily, where we will be talking about how organizations are preparing for an uncertain future and ensuring their people are positioned for success, health, and happiness. After the conclusion of the panel discussion, we will hear from John Farr, Director of Data at Sounding Board, in his Fast Talk, How to Ensure Your Leadership Development Measurement Strategy is Future Ready. And finally, we will conclude today's event with an interactive discussion where I will be joined by John and where all attendees will have the opportunity to share some of your perspectives and reactions in the area of leadership development for the future of work. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's panel, Audrey Masonette Morales. Audrey is Vice President of the award-winning Enterprise Learning and Blue University at Blue Cross Blue Shield of North Carolina. With more than 29 years of experience, she has established a solid reputation as a trusted thought leader. Audrey serves on Chief Learning Officers Advisory Board, as well as the boards of North Carolina Business for Education, Durham Compact, Center for Talent Reporting, and the Durham Chamber of Commerce, to name a few. And additionally, Audrey actively volunteers for a wide range of civic and community opportunities and is committed to paying it forward and helping others achieve their personal best. So we're so honored to have Audrey join us today. I'd also like to welcome Renee Manning Slaughter, Director of Talent Management at Valmont Industries, Lori Mazan, Co-founder and President and Chief Coaching Officer at Sounding Board, and Joshua Remorowski, Senior Director, Learning and Leadership Experience at Fortive Corporation. Please, we encourage you to drop your questions in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen throughout the discussion. And of course, we also encourage you to connect and share your thoughts in the chat as well. So without further ado, Audrey, it's my pleasure to pass it over to you.
Good morning, and thank you so much for that gracious introduction, Ashley. I am so thrilled to be here, and what a treat we have for you. We've got a dynamic panel of awesome leaders today and talking about a very important topic. So many lessons have emerged or have been underscored during the past couple of years. But one of the biggest is that change is the only constant. And rather than fear it, we must embrace it in order to thrive. But how can organizations prepare for an uncertain future and ensure their people are positioned for success, health, and happiness in 22 and beyond? So let's get started. Renee, Lori, and Josh, can each of you share a bit about your background as well as your current role and who your learning talent audience is?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Audrey. I'll go ahead and start. I'm Renee Slaughter. I am the Director of Talent Management at Valmont Industries. Valmont Industries is a global manufacturing company that's focused on conserving resources and improving life throughout the products that we develop for agriculture and infrastructure. So I lead talent management and leadership development for our current and emerging talent. My background is rooted in industrial organizational psychology. I have close to 20 years of experience in the talent management and leadership development space, both as an internal talent management expert and then also externally as a consultant in this space as well. So in terms of our learning audience, it really includes all of our employees across the world where we operate. And then more specifically, we also target what we consider our talent audience, which includes our leaders in critical roles, those in the pipelines to fill those critical roles, and then our high potential and emerging leaders, regardless of what their role is across the company.
Okay, great. And I'm Lori Mazan. You heard all my many titles there. I am a 25-year, let's say 25-year executive coach. I actually started coaching leaders in 1994. And then after 20 years, felt like, gosh, this is really just geared towards the highest leaders in an organization. And each one of those leaders always told me like, oh, I wish I had this earlier in my career. So I teamed up with a previous client actually and started Sounding Board with the goal to bring executive style coaching to all leaders in an organization. And we've been doing that about 6 years now.
Yeah, Joshua Romarowski. I lead learning and leadership experience at Fortive. Our company is, I would say, pretty unique. It's more styled like a private equity company. So we have 20 operating companies within it. It's a highly matrix company. We do things from software in manufacturing and healthcare all the way to electronic manufacturing in healthcare and software. And we do things like precision technologies that build the tiny explosive devices in the ejector seat of a fighter jet. So our company has a really vast array of things we support, do, sell, and really an array of talent all over the globe. We're in 50 countries and we're headquartered in Everett, Washington. My audience is I lead learning and leadership for all 17,000 of our employees, who we mainly serve. And I would say we've historically done a good job of serving as probably the top 10% of leaders. And that's really why I joined this company, to kind of shift that focus to making sure that our middle managers, frontline managers, and the rest of the leadership talent and pipelines are healthy and are developed well, cared for, and can really help us build our future capabilities. From a background standpoint, mine is not traditional. I started my career as a truck driver for FedEx Ground, running around carrying treadmills and all kinds of stuff. I have tons of crazy stories of that time, and finally got into learning and development about 10 years ago. And that's where I've spent really in learning and talent and HR in the last 10 years of my career.
Very good. Thank you all very much for that. As you all can hear, we've got some diversity in our backgrounds, in the audiences in which we reach. So I'm really hopeful that as we get into this topic, each of you are going to be able to see and hear things that really do resonate for you. So let's lean into this. In the context of being future ready, what are you prioritizing to ensure your people are successful, see opportunities for growth, and are healthy and happy as we move forward into an increasingly uncertain and changing times? Josh, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, so I think when I look at setting our people up for success, it's actually meeting them where they at, or where they're at in their journey. And with us, we have, I think, like a lot of folks with COVID, had a lot of turnover, a lot of attrition, a lot of people realizing that there's this thing called LinkedIn, and they have a lot more opportunity than maybe they were aware of in the past. And so you have a lot of new people, from a president all the way down to frontline manager, that have relatively low tenure in role. And so really our focus and my focus is, hey, how do we not only build their capabilities before we find ourselves in that position, but also understand like that they all uniquely need something different based on the types of business that they support. So a big focus for us right now, and not only that the times are continuing to be uncertain with recessions and wars and everything else that impact our businesses, I think in fairly unique ways, is just structuring our overall.
Did Josh freeze?
He froze.
I think he did. All right, let's improvise. Lori, why don't you jump in and tell us a little bit about what you're doing?
Yeah, because mine kind of follows on a little bit from what Joshua was saying. I forgot to mention my audience before, because I have two audiences. I have the internal audience of the Sounding Board employees, and then the external audience of all the customers that we provide leadership development for. So sometimes those are similar and sometimes those are very different. Oh,
Right.
here, I think Joshua's back, so let's
Joshua's
let him
back.
finish his. Yeah.
Joshua, you want to finish your thought?
Yeah, I guess Zoom doesn't like me, but yeah, I think more than anything with like leadership development and human centered development, our focus is just growing the person, right? So it's easy to develop skills for roles. Most of those skills will be outdated in the next 3.5 years. How do you build people that are resilient, that aren't impacted by their personal life, their personal traumas, the things that are rooted deeply in who we are and how we show up, that can adapt and be agile and be flexible and move into different roles and help lead through that uncertain time. You can't do that alone. You have to do it as a collective, and that comes with how we build cohorts. That comes from how we build people up through encouragement and empowerment, and obviously sharing the resources that each organization has for mental health, but being advocates to having deeper conversations around the whole human. And I think the better job we do that, the better job we'll be able to tap into what do people actually need from us, not just an e-module, not just another learning and development training, but maybe there's something deeper we can provide, because they spend most of their time in their life with us at work. So we really need to start paying attention to their needs beyond work. And I think the companies that do a really good job of that are going to position themselves very uniquely to be successful, not only in the short term, but definitely in the long term as the landscape continues to change.
Very good. Thank you for that.
And
Laura,
I'll just jump right in on that, because I think one of the trends happening for the future work is this desire for employees, leaders or not, to find more meaning and purpose at work, and to have a deeper sense of connection with the work that they're doing. So our focus is pretty similar to Joshua, actually, just helping people have the capability and desire to have more meaningful conversations throughout the organization. And we do that through coaching and really helping folks develop a set of capabilities and approaches, mindsets, thinking about these things that can be applied in a variety of situations, because as we all know, the future is pretty unpredictable at this point, and the workforce is much more diverse than it used to be. And so the range of approaches needed needs to be much broader. And I'm kind of with Joshua. Skills, yes, you have to have skills, obviously. But what's kind of the new trend is how you gain the judgment and the emotional intelligence and the wisdom and the empathy to apply those skills in such a variety of situations in a helpful, impactful way.
thank you for that. Renee?
Yeah, and I'll just continue on, the part about conversations, because I do think that's really important. And one of the things that we're doing specifically as we think about, making sure that our employees are happy and healthy and see a future with our company is putting, resources into our managers, helping to coach and build their skills and having career conversations so that employees know that there's a number of different things that they can do, right? It's not just a vertical movement. It's not just, you have to be in the corporate office and have that FaceTime with leaders in order to grow and have a successful career. So it's really helping to build those, I think, conversation skills with managers. And they can help then guide the employees, to see how they can be successful, what their career might look like in the future, because it's definitely different, and managers are having different conversations with their employees now than what they did 3-5 years ago.
Very good. Thank you. So I heard a few themes that are really interesting, and I'd like to lean in a little bit. So I heard the need to really anticipate what those needs are and having those unique solutions at the ready. I heard that we're building people rather than just widgets, right? Really focusing on the person. I heard the need for coaching and pouring into our leaders. Tell me a little bit about how you are framing all of this in the context of digital transformation and the need for data to be able to tell that wonderful story that you just articulated.
Mhm.
Laura, you're smiling. I'm going to start with you.
Oh, I just love the thing about people, not widgets. That really is another of the future trends, which is many of the roles that have been employee filled in the past are now or soon going to be filled in an automated way with robots or systems. And so that just presses the frame of reference away from the idea of cogs in a machine to really people. And I actually love that, because when you have people who are invested and aligned and committed, you're actually going to do really interesting, innovative, impactful things. If you're really training and supporting your workforce to do one thing only and do it repeatedly, we have done that in the past, but now the whole approach to development is changing. And I think one other thing that's been really different recently is the ability since the pandemic to do this all virtually, just like we're doing it right now. And so Sounding Board's full digital development platform, and Sounding Board itself is a fully remote organization. And so finding ways to keep people connected who are not in the same location, and whether you want to have office and location in a specific location, if you're like some of these other companies and you just have people worldwide, you still need to find ways to keep these people connected and coordinated. And even something simple like a coaching program, like what you're doing in one location could be very different than what you're doing in another location, just based on, the diversity of the environment or the needs in those locations. So having that range that you can have by using an automated solution is actually really in line with the changes that are going on.
Awesome. Thank you. Renee, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so a couple of things that come to mind. And as Lori mentioned, kind of how you can create a kind of digital transformation. I think it's important to talk about it in terms of kind of from an HR standpoint for how we're looking at it, and then organizationally that perspective. So when it comes to HR and how we can utilize the data that we have is, how can we take a look at what's needed across the globe, the different roles that we have, and match that up to the skills that our employees have or that they're wanting to develop, and to help them identify, I'm going to go back to the career conversations, but help them identify some careers, some gigs, some projects where they can start to build those skills, and then be able to target that employee population. So if it's HR, if it's managers, even if it's the employee that says, this is a great opportunity, I want to check it out, it looks like my skills are a good match for it. That's one way that we're looking at digital transformation just within HR. And then as we think about it more broadly, and when it comes to operationalizing digital transformation across the company, we're starting with defining it. So what does digital acumen actually mean? And then what is that going to look like for our employees? So providing that context, if you're in IT, if you're in finance, or the production employees on the floor, thinking about robotics, how can we also communicate to them what's in it for them? That it's not, they're not going away, they're not being replaced by these, you kind of in your head, you imagine a robot, a thing doing the work, but more, how can they see it as something that's going to help them to be more efficient so they can focus on different things, and just making sure that we communicate to them that, they're still valuable to us. This is all about how we can help your life and your work be improved, not just kind of the scary part that people think about when you think about digital transformation.
Very good. And Joshua, I'm going to also ask you to respond to this very important question.
Yeah, I think when you look at digital transformation, people are often focused on automation and robots taking their jobs, but really, we're not at that place at scale. So what we are at a place is with things like UiPath, you can find ways to automate non-value added work in the workplace to create space so people can go do more meaningful things. So I think like that's the first focus, like for us, is how can we leverage things that automate all this non-value added work that people get that just creates noise throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the year, and really prevents people from getting to doing the most important things that create the most value in an organization. I think most of that happens with just basic automation and getting rid of a lot of the administrative manual tasks that exists and just create unnecessary bureaucracy throughout an organization. I think that's one. I think the other thing that I look at from a digital transformation aspect beyond, I guess, automation is just what are we doing to make it that if I work at home, I work remote, or I work hybrid, that when I show up to the office and wherever that may be in those three places, depending on the day, that the experience is the same. I think that is one of the toughest nuts to crack organizationally, to where I can leave my at-home office, fly somewhere, and work, seamlessly. There's a lot of challenges, and a lot of companies have not kept up with the pace of change just through the last few years to spend the money on upgrading their equipment to make it to where people can walk a manufacturing floor no matter where they are, to make it where they can be present in a classroom no matter where they are. And the technology exists today, and it's existed for years. And it's just learning from the industries that have used that. And I think really getting that fundamentally into the fabric of who we are, that just says hybrid work's not going anywhere. How do we make the process more seamless? Because yet again, if you don't do it well, people will leave. No matter what flexibility you provide, because you're creating barriers that are making their work harder than it should be. So I think that's the other thing, is just figuring out how to make that process seamless. And it starts with looking at R&R, looking at the technology, and really just tackling it.
So those are very great points. And it leads me to another question that I want to ask in the same vein. So, when you talk to many, especially learning or talent leaders, they'll tell you that a lot of fear does rest with people really questioning what happens in this intersection of, human beings and technology and this process automation. And what is this going to mean for jobs of the future, skills of the future? Lori touched on this a little bit earlier, which is this need for us to really kind of drill into those human-centered skills, judgment, empathy, collaboration, all those things. Can you just take a moment to talk a little bit about how do you go about identifying what are those human-centered skills or competencies that's important to your organization, and then how you go about deploying them, for your respective audiences?
Mm-hmm. I can just start on that one, just from a more global perspective, having seen many companies identify these sets of capabilities. And what's been very interesting is there is a standard set of capabilities, maybe with a 10% diversity based on environment, but the basic set is very similar. I bet if we just all name some, or people name it in the chat, it's going to be more or less the same set of about 15 sets of capabilities and ways of thinking. So I think it's not as much about identifying those, although you can narrow in for your particular organization, as it is thinking about how do I help all employees, leaders, everybody in the organization level up their ability to operate in that range of capabilities.
Very
That
well
to me,
stated.
that's really the big challenge. Yeah.
Very well stated. Awesome. Thank you for that. Let's move on to the next question. So with all that in mind, all that we've talked about thus far, what I'm hearing is we've kind of moved away from this concept of one size fits all. So with that in mind, how are you evolving away from this one size fits all into differentiated development? How are you rethinking inclusion in your learning and embedding inclusion in all of your learning and talent approaches? Let's start with you, Renee.
Sure. So one of the things that we're doing, and we are looking at that, how do you personalize development, but still offering, leadership development workshops for folks around the globe. So, with COVID, I would say one of the silver linings for our company is that we've opened up the doors for people where we normally wouldn't. Again, we're based out of Omaha, Nebraska. So instead of saying for these specific roles, you have to move here. So I feel like that's been an advantage of ours. And part of that was also taking the leadership development workshops that would have traditionally been completed in person virtually. So we continue to do that. We continue to, be able to include others across the organization, regardless of what role you're in, to attend these leadership development courses, which I think are still really important for people to build those foundational skills. So being able to continue to leverage Zoom to bring that to people who may not otherwise have been had the opportunity to go through leadership development courses. We do that with internal facilitators. So we focused on building that skill from our employees, even outside of HR. So we've got plant managers that go through the facilitator training as well, so that they can offer it to their teams on site. And then we're actively seeking out employees that are multilingual, that can speak several different languages other than English, of course, to be able to provide that opportunity for our employees as well. So we like to start with that foundational skill set. And then from there, being able, again, through those career conversations of our employees and with the support of managers, them to be able to seek out, okay, this is what I want to do, not just a title or a role, but these are the things that are really interesting to me, that really motivate me, give me energy, and how can I get there? So we've got the leadership development, and then going back to the 70-20-10 focus of skill building and leadership development, how can we find those experiences for them? And that's going to look different for every employee, based on the experiences that they've had in the past and where they want to go in the future.
Excellent. Thank you for that. Anyone else like to add to that?
Yeah, I think often we think too small when it comes to our development offerings. Like, we think as leaders, we can choose people the best. And I think that's a very small view of leadership. I would say most of us maybe pick one great leader, but a lot of times it's the people that you don't realize are great leaders. So I think it's looking at what do people do in other industries that's not necessarily in learning and development that can allow us to not provide a one size fits all solution. So every year you get open enrollment for health benefits or open enrollment for these other things that you can sign up for. I think just making leadership development more open for the people that actually want to take part in it, actually want to develop themselves and learn more, benefits an organization, whether they become the next Steve Jobs or just work in front lines of a factory forever. The fact is that you want as many people in your organization to develop themselves and be invested in developing themselves as possible. So that's the big thing that we're looking to do, is how do we just make it open to as many people and not think as
Uh-oh.
Come back.
All right, we lost it again.
Well, I can jump in because I actually,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I agree with that. One of the problems in that I've seen over, 25 years now is a more subjective view on who is a good leader.
That's
And
right.
some of the traditional methodologies used to select leaders are really subjective. And I think Joshua's right that sometimes we think we're the best determiner of who's a good leader, but with such a diverse environment now, when everyone was homogenous, maybe that was true, but now leadership looks very different depending on who you are, and a lot of different styles of leadership can be very impactful and actually needed. So I think some other methodology needs to be developed to help, self-select is good too, but to help identify who are your next leaders, who's in your pipeline for your succession planning. One thing that we've been trying out at Sounding Board, which has been really interesting, is to start using a lot more gap analysis. So what are the skills needed and what are the skills there and how to fill those gaps? What's the gap between the employee's career aspirations and where they are now? What's the gap between the view of the employee and their manager? So trying to close those gaps seems to be a different way to think about some of these problems than a more linear scale where you're going, 1 to 10 or 0 to 100.
Very good. Thank you. Josh, you froze again. Would you like to finish your thought?
Zoom does not like my computer. I don't think we don't use Zoom. No, I think 100%. I see someone wrote in the chat, like, democratization of development is important. And I just think, I just think that's how we have to look at it. I just think for a long time, we've looked at it so niche that you nominate people and select very specific people. And that's why so often 85% of our population in organizations aren't developed and forgotten and then leave, and we act surprised.
100%. Very good. So with all that we've talked about thus far, that's a lot of change. And we talked about in the very beginning that if you can't count on anything else, you can count on the fact that change is a constant. So I asked the question, are you observing change fatigue in your respective organization amongst your teams? And how are you addressing it?
I can go ahead and
Go ahead.
start with that if that's all right with everyone. I think that people are, seeing that change fatigue, but I also think it looks very different because people react very differently to stress, and this is a big one. And so I think, again, I'm going to lean on, managers and them being able to identify what change fatigue might look like in their employees, and being able to, have that trusting relationship to ask them, to talk to them about it, and what they can do to help those individuals with that change fatigue. I think knowing that it's going to, there's always going to be change. If it's in the job that you're doing, if it's, the hybrid work, working from home, having to go to the office, all the different changes that are going to come across to employees. One of the things that we're doing, again, from a global perspective and offering to our employees tactically, is providing them opportunities to learn how to embrace what change looks like for them. And then for our managers, how you lead through that change. So recognizing that change fatigue, how to have those conversations with their employees. And then also, reminding employees what's not changing, because I think that's part of it, right? Is when it comes to change, is that fear of change and how it affects them. So reminding them what's not changing for those employees, that the values of the companies aren't changing, that your focus on your customers isn't changing. So also helping them to see what's not changing in terms of how they're connected with the organization, and then making sure that you are also showing your employees that you value them. So how can managers do that? How can leaders be able to really show their employees that they are valued, and that that's not changing for them?
That's right. Very good. Joshua, want to answer the question?
Yeah, we'll see how this goes. Yeah, I think change isn't just happening organizationally, it's happening every day in life. I mean, look at the last few years. So I think it just goes to people and leaders paying attention to like the environment that we live in. There's all kinds of things that are happening that might be creating stress that we don't realize. And, you know, the one thing that is constant in life is change. I mean, we live on a rock that hurls around a ball of fire through infinity. And we think we have control over things. And I think the big thing for us is that we have no control over most of the things in our life or our future, but we do have control at least of what we try to do to prepare ourselves for those things. So I think investing in your mental health and leaders encouraging people to look deeper in how to grow their capabilities beyond just being a good worker, I think is what is not only helps us sustain through change, but allows people's outlooks to shift when change does occur. And you can see it in the marketplace right now with companies laying people off. It's not the first time, it sure won't be the last time. And it's how are you preparing yourself mentally and, you know, figuring out the skills and capabilities you need to be placed in whatever the future of work looks like. So I think small or big, it's going to continue to happen, and it happens on all fronts.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of like a mindset change, really, that change is like not a bad word, that it's just is what it is. And I think the capability really is around how to respond to changes, not just resist or react. Because as Joshua says, like, we can't necessarily control the change, but we can control how we respond to that. I think one thing that's been challenging for folks is how unpredictable the change has been. I think when the change is more measured and people can be previewed to it and have a process, you know, they still may not like it that much, but they can kind of get the picture of it. But when it's unpredictable and you literally don't know what's going to happen the next day, I think the stress of that for folks is really tough. And when you think of probably most employees, but certainly leaders, you have your own stress that you're trying to manage, and you have the stress of your employees, team, company, whatever level it is that you're trying to manage. So you're really doing double duty there. So it's pretty impactful.
So Lori, you just said something that's so profound, and that is sometimes we forget that as organizations are dealing with so much change, leaders are also going through the change, the very change that they need to champion. So
Yeah.
some of the comments in the chat here, we're really wondering, what are we doing to help shift that paradigm of leaders and to effectively develop them to be effective in this new space that, you know, current leadership development programs are just lacking. So can anybody offer any tools that they're using or any thoughts that they have around how they are upskilling leaders and helping to shift that paradigm?
Well, I can give a plug for coaching right here. You kind of set me up for that. But one reason I really like coaching as a solution or support system for some of this is it can work from multiple different perspectives. So an example is we coached lots of people virtually during the pandemic, and the pattern was pretty much always the same. First, the coach had to work through the individual's reaction, situation, help them get set up at home or whatever they were doing. And then once that leader got a little bit settled, then they help them think about it. Okay, now that you have a little space around you, what about your organization? And that sort of like 1-2 approach seemed to work really well. The little plug for coaching I like is because it's so individualized. You're going to be able to work on whatever is needed in the moment, in that leader's role, in that job, and what's coming up in the future for each individual depending on their need. And the the coaching itself is kind of this blend of support and development, the development being a change of mindset that then opens the door for a whole new set of behaviors that can be utilized and then tend to stick, because when the thinking and the behaviors are in alignment, now there's no like cognitive dissonance that has people fall back to old habits.
Very well stated, Lori. Thank you for that. So I'm going to redirect us back to this notion of collecting data and being able to tell the story around it. And so again, in the context of all that we've been talking about so far, how are you collecting feedback from your workforce, engaging their thoughts and concerns around the future? And then with that, what are you hearing?
You know, we're doing, I would say, right, that the whole employee listening approach is starting with engagement surveys, pulse surveys, targeted surveys for our leaders based on what they're specifically looking at. And, you know, what I've seen personally is our leaders taking that into consideration and acting on it. So we had, you know, one of our full engagement surveys for all of our employees back in 2021. And, you know, I know our leaders are, you know, they hear, you know, from their other partners, you know, this need to move back to the office and return to the office. And so they're taking that into consideration, hearing from their peers, you know, what they're focused on and what they need to do differently. And then what I've seen is when our employees do respond to those surveys and provide that feedback, they listen. So I've seen a change of mind where, you know, their initial thought was, yeah, we've got to get people back in. You know, what are we going to do? How are we going to make this work? How many days are they going to be in the office? To listening, reading the comments from our employees that say, you know, hey, we want to keep this flexibility for those that can. And for those that can't, that focus on, you know, health and safety. But I've seen them actually change. You know, they had these external voices, you know, urging them to do something, but then they listened to their employees and they made the decision to do exactly what the employees were asking, which is let us keep this flexibility, let us choose when we're in the office and when we're not. And so that's a continued theme that we're hearing, right, too, is wanting to focus on that, what we can do for those that can have that flexibility and that focus on, you know, health and safety for those that can't. But I absolutely, that was one of those things that from my perspective in talent management that I loved seeing, is that they listen to our employees first and they change their strategy and their approach because of it.
Very good. Thank you. Josh.
Yeah, I think when you look at big data, this kind of goes to the future of work. ATD's like last study in like 2017, most organizations don't measure learning past level 1. And one of the primary excuses is that they're not provided the tools or resources to do so. So I would say the first thing is, what are we as learning professionals and people in talent and HR actually doing to learn the skills required to like actually take advantage of the data that exists and start collecting it and do something with ourselves and stop waiting for everyone else to do it for us. I think if you want to create value in an organization, then go create value. Quit waiting for someone else to do the work for us, especially if you want to be respected in whatever organization that you work for. And so that starts with like for us, like we didn't have a data warehouse. So start collecting the data. Just because you don't have all the things to do something with the data doesn't mean you shouldn't at least start collecting it. And like the big key is just starting. And then I think, you know, the pulse survey that Renee mentioned is important. When I worked at Walmart, we started doing a daily pulse, asking every single day a set of questions to find out, very much like Planet Fitness, hit the smiley face or whatever it is when you leave the building. But I think the days of asking twice a year an employee engagement survey are way past us. And the organizations that don't shift on how to get data real time and do something about it, and stop making excuses that they don't have a team or whatever it is to figure it out, go build the skills and capabilities on your own team and do something with it. It's not super hard. There's plenty of trainings out there. And I think once you do that and you can contextualize what's happening, you can start getting ahead of the problems with development, skill building, whatever it is, because people are willing to tell you what they need. And we just need to listen. And I think once we do a better job of that, and how we capture that data, I think a lot of things will shift. So that's our big focus, is just getting things into a data warehouse and start telling that story daily and get ahead of the wave of feedback and not just getting it all twice a year.
100%. I actually think that's one of the big values of the digital transformation, is just so much more data. We use something we call a well-being index. So at the beginning of meetings, or in all company events, or just even in small groups, people will start with, what's your well-being index for the day? We just use 1 to 10. And it just takes a small amount of time where people go around and give a number and maybe give a little context to their number. And if their number's low, they get a lot of, support, both in the moment and then following those moments. And the people who are doing well get to, show that as well. So that's been a really lovely way to kind of get a quick pulse on things, and also just allow some vulnerability to help people feel more connected and part of a community, and having a sense of safety to talk about how they are really doing.
Excellent, very good. We're going to pause here. Ashley is going to come back on and join us. We've got some great questions, some of which we already touched on through the panelists' responses. Other questions we have yet to get to. So Ashley is going to help present those questions and give the panelists an opportunity to respond accordingly. Ashley?
Sure. Great conversation. And I'll try to pitch over the questions that haven't already sort of been covered in the discussion. I figured I'd bring this one up first because it was a simple one, but I know, Lori, I think you referred to a digital skill set earlier in the conversation. And someone had asked where they could find that digital skill set. So is that something that
not so much a digital skill set, but a set of capabilities that allows you to deal with change, including digital transformation. I can just send that out to anybody who's interested. And we have speaking of data, we have a lot of data around that, just because our system collects all the capabilities that anybody who's coaching with us, or even internally in our customer companies, work on. So we have a lot of information about what the standard set is.
Fantastic. Thanks, Lori. I thought that this was an interesting one. So someone said, for the panel, how have you incorporated the concept of communities to build or reinforce culture now that we are hybrid? Less in-person water cooler chat means we need to help our colleagues connect or continue to connect. For example, have you implemented formal connection days?
Yeah, we've done cohorts. So like the way we build, no matter what the training is, they're in a cohort, and then there's a larger cohort where that's their community for sharing best practices. And then in the cohorts, they have specific days throughout the year that they meet and discuss specific topics based on follow-up from whatever we're developing them on. And that just takes time and a little bit of planning to map out those journeys. And then if you have some type of social platform or whatever way you want to do it, but there's plenty of low fidelity things you can do to allow people to collaborate, from Teams to Yammer to whatever thing you use in your company.
And for that, we're leveraging our ERGs, our employee resource groups, to help with those connections. So we haven't had, I would say, those formal connection days. We have teams that do some of that, but we are looking at how we can leverage our ERGs more to create that feeling of community. So continuing with those virtual events, starting to implement things in the community, but we're working with our ERGs to see how we can continue to do that.
Yeah, and I think one of the keys to that is just variety, because people like to connect in different ways. So we do everything from one-on-one coffee chats all the way up to, an entire employee meeting or entire team meeting in person that we call home week. And we don't do those big events that often. So the smaller individual, pairs, cohort is really nice, small group, then it leads up to a big event so that people get a wide variety. If I'm an introvert, I don't necessarily want to always be operating in a cohort. I might want to, just talk with one other person or use Slack or something, right?
I'm trying to keep up with the questions here. Now they're coming in fast.
Yeah, for the capabilities, folks, I don't have that on the tip of my finger. So I hope we can just send it out to you after this event.
That's right.
Yeah, we should be able to do that.
Great.
So someone asked, what new learning techniques are you offering to personalize upskilling and development using digitalization? So are you using any simulation-centered learning? And kind of in the same vein, someone had asked if you're looking into innovative technology or trends for getting people future ready, such as learning in the metaverse, VR, personalized learning recommendations based on AI, etc.
So we're starting on that journey when it comes to virtual reality. We are looking at that for onboarding our employees. So what might that look like, for them to have that journey virtually, versus on the plant floor, for example. And then when it comes to AI and personalized learning recommendations, we've started that journey as well. So it is, kind of first starts with mapping of what those skill sets are, and then what are those different learning journeys that somebody can have, whether it's through experience, coaching and mentoring, or formal learning programs. But there's a work that we're doing behind the scenes to map those out. And then what's really important is, and Josh mentioned having that data warehouse, is making sure that we've got good data coming in from our employees so that we can start to match up where they are saying their skill sets are, what they want to learn, and then match those to those different learning journeys. And then that third step is going to be the actual AI behind it. So more of that, algorithms that can help them identify those different learning paths and say, hey, this looks like, you're at this level, you want to get here. Here's option A that you can take, or here's option B to get you there. So we're starting on that journey. There's just a lot of work in the background that we need to do in order to leverage those.
And how about you, Josh? Any thoughts around that?
I mean, I'm more of like a AR person than VR. I think in general, just because we used a lot of VR and AR at Verizon. I think AR has more flex capabilities for like mixed reality. And so we did some really great implementations there. Cost was about $1.1 million. And it just came down to just presenting a really good business case that like, hey, this is the value proposition from using this technology to implement these things. Not just that we think it's cool, right? I think that's where I've seen like a lot of implementations for technology not happening, is because really the only thing we're bringing to the table is we think it's cool. We have no data to provide our leaders to then take out of their budget and their P&L millions of dollars to spend on these things. So I think the better we come equipped with technology, specifically like AR in the manufacturing floor, and to just blend worlds, especially with hybrid, I think is a really interesting use case for the business I'm in today. I think VR was a much better use case for where I worked previously. And so I think then the other thing beyond technology is just like, are you even using the crap you have now? Like, I just everywhere I go, people tell me they don't have the tools and they don't even use the tools they have now. So I think my thing is, if you want someone to take you seriously with spending money on tools for the future, you better be using the crap you have now. to its full capability. And I would say, if you really look in the mirror with self-confrontation, you probably aren't, because when I came here, they have a bunch of crap that they're not using and haven't got the full, value out of that's on our budget. And so that's the first thing we're going to do. We're going to use the technologies to their highest capabilities now, and then decide where we should really spend money, because a recession's coming up. We're in one, depending on who you're talking about. That's what your C-suite cares about. They care about the fact that there's pressure from the Fed raising rates. That means the money that they have out on growing their business has a higher interest rate, which means jobs are at risk, which means how do we provide more value? So if we start to learn how to provide value with the things we already have, that's where you'll get a lot more things in the future over the finish line that you want to do. But you have to know what they're looking at. It's not some onboarding training. It's financial pressures that shift and change an organization and the stock price and everything else. So I think AR is great. The other thing that we're looking at is just how we fundamentally do anything with technology. And so Tony Robbins has what's called his 6 human needs, which are certainty, variety, significance, connection or love, growth, and contribution. And so really that's how we're looking to build all of our programs, is to provide those things, because that's what human beings need. And so one of the things we've talked about in a hybrid remote workplace is people are lacking that connection and love. And Marcus Buckingham has a great book that he came out with called Love and Work. And I think that's one of those things where it's not just our job as leaders to get people to love their work. People have to do the work themselves. So you can love pretty much anything you do if you change your mindset. So.
And just a quick last thing on some of this AI, we use that a lot at Sounding Board because we use it for our matching algorithm for coach and coachee, and in a lot of other ways, because AI fundamentally is pattern recognition. And that pattern recognition provides really useful data that can help with the decision making and really just awareness, because you may not know a pattern that you're caught in unless it's pointed out to you. So there are a lot of tools that are pretty simple that can give you some of that pattern recognition data that you're not seeing. VR and AR, I actually had a VR company before Sounding Board, and it's really exciting, very cool stuff. I'm not sure it's ready for prime time in terms of the cost and effort of implementing for the value return yet. I think it will be in the future, but it's not quite there yet in my mind.
Thanks. Thank you all for chiming in on that one. I know, Audrey, that you have a hard stop coming up here. So I'll hold off on any further questions and let you kind of wrap it up, Audrey, and then I'll kick things over to our Fast Talk speaker. Oh, I think you're on mute.
Thank you. Awesome questions. Your panelists, of course, you guys are killing it. I do want to ask one last question as we wrap up this fantastic discussion. Final thought, what's top of mind for you as we move into 2023 and the future of work? I'd like to hear what's top of mind for you and what's that one thing that's keeping you up at night?
I can jump in here quickly and start us off. So for us, our focus is going to be continuing the digital transformation, what that looks like for our functions as well as our employees. And I would say, manager effectiveness comes to mind too. So we talked a lot about the managers, having those rich conversations with employees, also being able to help them embrace and lead change. And I also think it'll be really important for us to focus on our manager effectiveness as we think about digital transformation and the future of work.
Very good. Thank you. Lori?
I would say change management and really the meaningful conversations like that, human to human connection that keeps people not just compliant at work, but committed to their work.
Yeah, we're we're a continuous improvement company at its core. So for us, it's about solving problems every single day, and really eliminating waste in our business. And so the big thing for me is, how do we equip everyone in our organization, no matter the country they work in, no matter their title, to solve those problems? And so that's the big thing that we're working towards, is how do we get those skills fundamentally deeper into the organization? Because yet again, like historically, we've really focused at the top 10%, thinking they can lead those things, but they're not the ones doing those things. So how do we equip the rest of the organization that does most of the doing, with the ability to see the problems before they get bubbled up to some executive, when it's, too late, sometimes.
Very good, thank you. Panelists, you did a fantastic job. Thank you so much for your time today. Audience, thank you so much for your engagement and the wonderful questions. I'm hopeful that everyone found some nice nuggets to take away. The conversation continues. It doesn't stop here. So I do encourage you, outreach to us, outreach to other people. Maybe you've met some friends today online. The future of work is coming. We know that change is a constant. And the change does not reside just with learning, talent, and human resources professionals. It's going to take all of us to really ready our organizations as things continue to evolve. We heard today that we know that skills that are much more human-centric are going to be important as we look at the intersectionality between technology and people. We heard that coaching is a fantastic tool, especially as we talk about readying our leaders, which are central to this change. We understand that continuous improvement is going to be a tool that you need to have in your back pocket. This once or twice a year is just not going to cut it anymore. We know that data is our friend. Learning is not necessarily known for being the most data-ready folks, but we've got to embrace data and learn how to tell those very value-added stories. As we think about how we start to embrace technology and innovations, getting comfortable with experimentation, not getting rooted in what we've always done, is going to be super important. And I think most importantly, having that business case that really does put forward your why, not because of a cool factor, but actually because it's going to drive business value for your organization. So with all that said, I'm Audrey Mason-Morales. It was a pleasure moderating this great discussion with these awesome leaders. Thank you so much for your time today.
And thank you so much, Audrey. Thank you, and to each of you for being here. Audrey, thank you for moderating. Lori, Renee, Josh, thank you for sharing your thoughts here today. And again, thanks to everyone in attendance for your questions, your engagement. It so often happens that the insights and the knowledge and ideas shared in the chat add a whole extra level of value to these conversations. And I'd just like to note that once this session concludes, within the next day or so, we'll be following up with all registered attendees with a link to the recording of this session, as well as a transcript of the chat for your reference. So again, thank you to each of you for being here with us today. At this time, I'm pleased to pass things over to John Farr, Director of Data at Sounding Board, for his fast talk, how to ensure your leadership development measurement strategy is future ready.
Hey, Ashley, thanks so much for the introduction. Just super excited to be here with everybody today. Really excited to talk about really creating a leadership development measure strategy that's future ready. There's a lot that goes into measuring leadership development, and I want to start off with just a quick story, personal story. A couple of weeks ago, I had a chance to work with my family, my wife, and one of my adult sons to build we had to replace a part of our privacy fence, and we've never done this before. I'm not necessarily, I'm not Tim the Toolman Taylor, so construction is not really my thing. And so embarking on this adventure to build this privacy fence, it's gonna be really fun to share this story with you as we go and as we talk about what it really means to measure leadership development. Because and you'll hear me talk a little bit more about this down the road, but there was a lot of leadership development capabilities that came out in this project. So we'll go ahead and jump into the discussion real quick. And this is going to be a fast talk. There's going to be a lot of information, so feel free to send questions in for the Q&A part here at the end. Now, as we get started, one of the things we're going to talk about real quick is just what it means to have some trusted technology. And what's going to be really important about this conversation is I'm going to start off with some alignment premises so that all of us, everybody that's listening to this webinar right now, can be in alignment. If we're not in alignment, it's going to get really difficult to move forward into the future. So when it comes to alignment on what we need to develop leaders at scale, we're going to need technology to manage the information. If you're doing this with one or two leaders, that's one thing. But when you're talking about managing or measuring leadership development for hundreds or thousands of people, we have to have good technology. We have to have high quality data that creates accurate measurements that can become actionable. If we can have lots of data, but if we can't actually move on it, it's not as helpful to us. People have to be able to trust the technology they use to store really sensitive data. Because as you know, if you don't trust the technology you're using, you're just not going to put data into it. And then the last one's pretty obvious. Without data, there are no measurements and there are no actions. So when it comes to the psychological safety of technology, it's really important to understand that when you're measuring leadership development and you're putting information into a platform, there's a lot of really highly confidential data sets that are going to be involved in this. Especially if you're using coaching as one of those tools. Leaders and coaches they're going to communicate with each other. Managers are going to provide feedback. If you're doing mentoring, leaders and mentors are going to have communications, and then leaders are going to have notes just about themselves in general. And so it's really important to have clear expectations. You have to be able to express and clearly communicate to people, how is the data being used in its raw and its aggregated and anonymized form? Where is it stored? How is it stored? And who can see it? Because it's one of the biggest barriers to collecting data, especially the really sensitive data that you do need to be able to make decisions. So, so now we're going to talk about what it means to actually really measure progress. There's a difference between activity and progress when it comes to measuring leadership development. And really what we're looking for is finding that data gold. So as we're continuing along with these alignment premises, and again, feel free if there's anything here you don't agree with, feel free to share or ask questions. But alignment premise number 5 is that everybody is different. Everybody's got a different social style, a work style, a learning style. Alignment premise number 6 is that everybody's path to becoming a great leader is going to be different. So the technology that you're using has to be able to accommodate those differences. So now we're going to talk about really measuring the intangible, because it's the intangible that leads to the tangible. That's really the data gold. Tangible results obviously are easy to see because of their visibility. But when you have consistency in mindset and behavior capabilities, you're going to start to see a lot of goals and outcomes. Measuring tangible results over time is going to show momentum, consistency, which then can allow you to predict future success. And the right information can actually help coaches become even more effective, because coaches need to know when to pivot, when to circle back, when to change direction. You may start with a mindset and move to capability. You may start with behavior and go to goal. You're gonna end up hitting all 4 of them at some point in time, but each person is coming into this journey in a completely different way. I think about this fence project. We could have just said, okay, we got the materials bought and the fence is up, and that's our measurement. We had a goal to complete the fence and it was successful. But what we would have missed would have been an incredible amount of insight into out of the 16 leadership capabilities that we track at Sounding Board. I think as when I was reviewing this project, we were actually growing in about 13 of those capabilities. Some of the things I got to do up front, we had to get alignment with our neighbor on what we're going to do. I had to do research. I had to ask for help from some friends who actually had experience doing this. I had to put the team together. I had to schedule. I had to communicate. We had to create a budget. We had to purchase materials. We had to overcome some mistakes along the way, some obstacles, challenges. We had to make some critical decisions on the fly. We had to create an environment of inclusivity and engagement. I'm putting my 25-year marriage to the test here, all my communication skills, a lot of different things on the line here, as an opportunity to grow closer together. We had to try, we had to evaluate, we had to pivot, and then we had to keep repeating that as we were going. We had to be challenged. We had to be ready to learn and grow. There was an opportunities to encourage and praise. There was the opportunities to remind people of, hey, here's what I need you to do. So there was accountability. We all got to enjoy the finished product. And then what was amazing about that is our confidence increased at the end of that project, not only in our leadership capabilities, but in our confidence together as a team, knowing that we could actually do this again. So a lot of, imagine if we weren't able to capture all of the insights that happened along that journey, to understand the intangible pieces that were in flight, that were building, and the momentum was building, and the consistency was changing. And if we didn't have that information, it would be really hard to even think about how we would talk about future projects or success. So how we do it today. Today, one of the really common methodologies for measuring leadership development is to use capability ratings. What is your confidence in your ability to communicate, or to be inclusive, or to set a vision, direction, or whatever the capability is. And the challenge with that is that one number doesn't really tell the whole story, because there's a difference between becoming more self-aware of, wow, I got a lot to learn, and am I making progress? And so when you try to put too much meaning into one number without all the context, then the number can get really fuzzy. So what we're working on tomorrow in the future is building out a next level set of insights and questions and feedback to be able to really understand where people are at in their journey. One of the things I'm really excited about is we're going to be doing this with our own internal employee base at Sounding Board, where everybody in the company receives leadership development coaching. So we've got a great group of people to work with. And we're actually going to be working on this over the next quarter, putting together a series of new questions that's going to give insight, not only, and the exciting part is not only are we going to be getting more clarity and context around where each person is in their leadership development journey, but we're also looking to see if the questions that we're asking are actually increasing motivation, because that's going to be a really big part of it. You want people to be excited about giving you the information, because there's ultimately a benefit to you, but also to them as well. So that's a really important part of it. And the confidence and the capability is one thing, but understanding that difference between becoming self-aware of where I need to go and how I'm actually progressing, those are two totally different things. So now we're going to talk real quick about engagement. When it comes to leaders who are going through the process of developing and engaging in that process and reporting back the information that you need, one of the things that we use today, in addition to coaching, is surveys and assessments. You've heard that being talked about on the panel today. The challenge with assessments and coaching, in the sense of from a standpoint of collecting data, is that most coaching engagements use verbal communications. Surveys and assessment completion rates for a lot of folks are low. It's sometimes very difficult to get that information. Now at Sounding Board, we have a really high NPS for our coaching. We have a high coach satisfaction rate, high survey completion rates, but that's still not enough information to really measure where we're at in the leadership development process. And so that's what I'm really excited about moving forward in the future, and just sharing just a little bit about what we're working on. But when it comes to alignment, premise number 7, and again, this is making sure that we're still all on the same page as we move through this conversation together. Right now, people have just too many apps. You got web apps, you got mobile apps, you got desktop apps. There's surveys after surveys after surveys. Everybody's getting questioned and asked for information on a regular basis. And so what we're really focused on is thinking about meeting people where they're already working, and then incentivizing them to want to work from that environment and to provide information. We want to be able to receive that digital input from the device, the app, whatever they're the most comfortable working with, whether it's Slack or Teams or text or Zoom or SurveyMonkey, whatever it may be. We want to make it easy for them to be able to actually see the meaningful progress. We're asking for data, and we're going to show you how it's going to benefit you. So that's a really important thing to understand when it comes to collecting the information in the first place. And this next piece is a really big component for moving into the future. Because one of the things that a lot of companies struggle with is the cost and speed of actually acquiring data. One of the things we're working on at Sounding Board right now is being able to create intelligently designed data structures, because as measurements evolve, we know they're going to change. What we want to measure, what we want to ask, that's going to change continuously. And when the data structures are intelligently designed, it will actually allow you to incorporate more data into a much smaller data schema with little to no additional cost. And that's going to be incredibly important, because as we have a need to acquire more data, if we have to stop and change the structure of our data every time we want to collect new information, which is what's happening today, that's going to take a lot longer to implement, and it's going to be more expensive. So today at Sounding Board, 90% of our data that we're collecting around leadership development is coming from surveys and assessments. 10% comes from other sources, but in the future, it's going to flip. 90% of that data is going to come from the apps that people are already using, and less than 10% will actually come from surveys and assessments. So just thinking about grabbing information from where people are already at is going to be a really big part of our future. So now we're going to jump into ROI, and when it comes to measuring ROI, obviously regardless of what it is you're measuring, data is going to be really important. And so to be able to measure whether or not I'm getting a return on investment for the money that I'm investing in the development of somebody else, it's really about understanding, is there momentum, is there consistency, and then can I predict future success from the things that I'm seeing? It's more than just accomplishing the end goal. It's the consistency of the mindset change, the behavior change, the growth, and the leadership capabilities. And what's really amazing about measuring ROI is that you can then start to see the ripple effect. You can predict future success and how one person's change in leadership development or their growth in leadership development can impact the entire rest of the organization. There's a really interesting article from science.org that talks about what percentage of the tipping point is when a minority group of people start to exhibit a certain type of behavior, and how that can then affect and influence the majority. And what they've proven out is that it takes about 25% of your people within a group that can start to have a substantial impact on the rest of your organization. Now, that's not 25% of your C-level. That's 25% of leaders all throughout the organization. So something to keep in mind. And then the last thing we're going to talk about real quick is just what it looks like in the future. We've hit a little bit on predictive analytics, machine learning, and AI in some of the panel talks. And so what I want to just give you just a quick taste of some of the things that we can do with predictive analytics, machine learning, and AI is just to be able to effectively and efficiently show us how to connect coaches and leaders based on social work and learning styles, to be able to define the journey for an individual leader that will lead to a higher degree of leadership development and growth, to be able to predict when coaching can make the biggest impact in the leader's career. And then I think one of the biggest ones, to be able to compare and contrast the growth of leadership development capabilities and the impact on company innovation, growth, and brand recognition. And this is just a tip of the iceberg. So what I wanted to, just wrapping up with this, the story of the fence, as we were working together on this project, there were times where my wife came up to me with an idea like, hey, what do you think about trying this or this? And in those high pressure situations, how quickly can we pivot to be able to say, you know what, let's just try it. Let's see what happens. And be able to, at the times where you've got to make critical decisions, being able to measure the results of all that, and then to be able to review. And if to be honest with you, if we had the ability to pay for the fence to be done, my neighbor was in agreement, we were going to split the costs. I didn't really save myself a lot of money in building the fence, but as a family, what we learned and how we grew, I can honestly say that I would have paid money if some company had come in and said, hey, John, we'll come in and teach you how to build the fence, teach you how to work together, and you're going to end up getting the fence, but then also being able to walk away with all of these capabilities. I would have personally paid more money than what it would have cost to build the fence from somebody else. And I think that's the power of leadership development and how it can benefit everybody. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Ashley, for some Q&A.
Yes, hi there. Let's see. I'm sorry I keep changing locations. I'm kind of in the middle of transitioning out of an Airbnb, so that's why I've been in 3 different environments, and thank you for bearing with me. So we did have actually 2 questions that I wanted to give you the chance to kind of address. The first one, and I think Kelly answered it in the chat, but just to verify, a number of people asked what tool it is that you're using that puts these slides to present your slides. People really like it.
Yeah, I'm using Prezi Video.
That's what I thought. And then more on the topic of leadership development. So some people have been talking earlier in the chat about how organizations should be evolving leadership development content to be responsive to the future ready organization, about how traditional leadership development programs don't necessarily accomplish those forward-looking ideas, and that organizations have to broaden the avenues for leadership development kind of at all levels. So I was curious to sort of hear your thoughts about that. Well, you know, how should leadership development content be evolving to be responsive to a more future ready organization?
Yeah, that's actually one of the things we're working on right now. You know, when you're talking about incorporating content into the coaching process, you know, each coach and each coachee or leader is going to have their own preferences for how they incorporate that. I think one of the biggest things that's going to be the most helpful is really understanding not just providing content for people for the sake of providing the content, but really validating how is this helping other people. And when you can see the content, if you're going to invest your time and resources into content, you want to know that there's value in that content. And so I think being able to, and again, that's where AI and predictive analytics will come in handy as well, to be able to, based on your leadership journey and what you're going through at any given time, what resources can help you based on how they've helped other people.
Thank you. Thanks for answering that. And thank you again for your excellent presentation. I think people enjoyed it. And yes, to answer a couple other questions, this portion has been recorded of the event as well and will be shared following the event. So you'll be able to reference back to this as well. So again, thank you, John, for being here today. And we appreciate this discussion.
Yeah,
At this time, I'm actually excited to hop back on with you to sort of facilitate our closing session. So we'd like to use this final 15-20 minutes or so to get a chance just to hear from all of you about the things that are going on in your roles in your organizations, and just to give an opportunity for a little bit more dialogue and sharing of ideas among our audience today. So we have a number of poll questions. Some of them are a little bit more open-ended, some of them are multiple choice. And additionally, as we're sharing these questions, if you have something to comment on or contribute, you can click the little raise hand icon at the bottom of the screen, and the event host will turn on your audio so you can comment live, or you can also just share your thoughts in the chat. We encourage that as well. So I think we can go ahead and kick things off. And John, do you want me to read these off, or do you want to take the lead there?
Yeah, sure, I can. Yeah, how much do you trust your current technology platform to store sensitive leadership development feedback, notes, and communication? And this is a really it's a big one, because again, if you don't trust the technology you're using, you're not going to put data into it. If there's no data, there's no measurement.
Do you have any among the choices? The no trust, some trust, moderate trust.
Oh yeah.
Do you have any predictions for what the feedback would be?
It's going to be interesting. I think that it depends on which type of content, but I'm going to say probably some to moderate. I don't think there's going to be. I think for most people, there's a little bit of interpretation about putting really sensitive data into a system.
Sure. Steve, I think we can go ahead and take a look at the results. Yep. So it looks like you were pretty much right on target. Only 3% said no trust, which is good. 18% said some trust, 41% said moderate, 28% substantial, and 10% not digitally storing that information.
Yeah, that's great.
Let's go ahead and take a look at the second one.
Yeah, so how difficult is it to get feedback from leadership development activities such as coaching engagement surveys in your organization? Is it somewhat challenging, moderate challenging, very challenging, or you don't currently use leadership development coaching?
Hmm.
So this would only apply to people who are actually doing some type of coaching activities to develop leaders.
Absolutely. And I would just wanted to point out that Jennifer just said thank you for the very useful information and suggestions for approaching data analytics. So thank you for attending, Jennifer. All right. I think it's been up long enough, Steve. We could probably go ahead and take a look at those results. All right, so 17% said somewhat challenging, getting that feedback from leadership development activities such as coaching engagement surveys. 34% said moderately challenging, 3% said very, and 45% currently aren't using leadership development coaching. So about half, it seems, are a little more than half.
Great. So if you are using this is more of a question, if you are using leadership development coaching and you're using surveys to get that data, what is your average completion rate for those surveys and assessments? Is it less than 10%? Is it 10 to 25%, 25 to 50, 50 to 75, or greater than 75%? This one's going to be really interesting to find out if for any of the leaders out there that know this information.
Yeah, we can leave it up for about 10 more seconds, 15 more seconds here.
I realize I probably should have had another answer of I don't know.
Yeah, if anyone has anything additional, like I don't know, or anything they want to chime in on the chat, obviously we invite that as well. And there we go. So it looks pretty spread out. Less than 10% came in at 5%. 27% of respondents said 10 to 25%. The majority at 36% said 25 to 50%. And then 18% said 50 to 75%, and 14% said more than 75%.
Yeah. One of the comments I saw just come in was just the struggle, even though the survey may get filled out, whether or not the answers are accurate or honest, or sometimes it's a challenge. And I think that's one of the things that goes back into the capability rating is if you're trying to answer a question, but the question doesn't really help you tell the whole story, you're going to be more reluctant to actually give people the information. Yeah, so here's poll number 4. Would you be interested in hearing the aggregated results of our new leadership capability assessment survey that we're going to be giving to our internal employees and completed early next year? So we're really excited to share this with what we're going to be doing with our own internal employees because we're in the same boat. We're trying to develop leaders within our own organizations. So we'd love to be able to share that if anybody's interested in hearing the results of that.
Yeah, and we'll leave this up for a little to make sure everyone has a chance to answer. But I liked Kelly's comment here in the chat as well. You know, what is the barrier to getting honest feedback? Is it company culture? What might be some of the other factors there?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with again, going back to if I'm in the process of becoming more self-aware, but maybe I haven't had a lot of progress and growth, then am I going to answer that leadership capability rating question accurately? Because I'm worried about how that's going to reflect back on me. And so that if I have to try to figure out how do I represent what's really going on in my world with this question that doesn't really fit, then they're going to try to create an answer that represents something to them that may not be what you're looking for.
Yeah.
So that the context of the question, getting the right context is super important. Great.
It's great.
Um,
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so that could be like a whole other conversation. Just the results of that and what we discovered from that.
Yeah. How are you? How will you be sharing that with people sort of once it's available?
Yeah, it'll be in an aggregated format, but
Okay.
it's going to be the details will kind of come around of not only is there a more clear understanding of where they're at in their leadership development, which capabilities are they working on, which ones are they not, but also are they more motivated to give us that information with the new questions we're going to be asking as opposed to the way we were doing it before. Yeah, so here's question number 5 is if you are responsible for managing leadership development at your company, what one word would you use to describe the results?
Yeah, and I'd encourage you to submit your short answers in the chat where we'd be able to see them when they pop up. I think it gives you an option to type them in the box, but if you'd like to plug them in the chat, then we could kind of shout some out here. Cheryl says engaged. Average, if I'm honest.
We appreciate the honesty.
Yes, absolutely.
You can put down words like frustrated or confused or don't know where to start. Those are all honest answers.
Lacking. Yeah.
We're excited. Or yeah, when it comes to building, yeah, I think one of the other interesting questions that came up earlier was how you get the C-suite really excited about investing.
Mm-hmm. Hopeful. Therese submitted hopeful, which I think is a good one. Feel free to keep throwing your answers in and as we take a look at poll 6.
Yeah. So poll number 6, how effective do you think surveys are in measuring leadership development? Somewhat effective, moderately effective, very effective, or we do not use surveys. And this kind of goes back to the point of, is the information you're getting accurate?
Mm-hmm.
Honest, accurate. Is there a concern about if I share too much information, this is somehow going to adversely affect me in my employment situation?
Interesting. This depends on when you provide the surveys and what you ask. And Renee says getting folks to show up and put their development ahead of the whirlwind activities is challenging. L&D is not always seen as high value.
Mm-hmm. I think that comes back to being able to show people the results of what they're actually giving you. How is it impacting them? And that's a big part of it.
Yeah. Joshua says, who was one of our panelists earlier, L1 are not helpful, but L3 can be very helpful. Mm-hmm. For leadership, it is very sensitive on the questions you ask them. Yeah, and please keep chiming in the chat. As in regards to the poll responses, 31% said somewhat effective, 50% said moderately effective, 8% said very, and 12% do not use surveys.
So you can see there the confidence is not really super high.
Yeah.
In the use of surveys, so which is one of the reasons why we're so focused on moving forward and getting insight and detail from people in the apps that they're already using today. So poll number 7, question number 7, you can do this one in the chat as well. What one word would you use to describe your current survey results? That's
a good one. And yeah, please feel free to plug that into the chat. Joyce also mentioned in regard to the last question, sometimes employees just breeze through the survey without thinking before answering questions, which I think is a good point. Mm-hmm. And we'll give people a few minutes to type out some responses here. And hopefully, John, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. I was a little worried about background noise, but
Oh, yeah, no, you sound great.
well, we can give people a few minutes to kind of start plugging those in. Someone said sometimes the employee is not thinking about the outcome of the data survey, not
Yep.
truthful assessments. Steve, in the meantime, I think we can put up poll 8 and let people take the time to respond to.
Yeah, I think we just have a couple more.
I think 2 more, I believe. So again, poll 8, a measurement question. How do you measure progress and growth in the development of an individual's leadership capability? So definitely feel free to put that in the chat.
Yeah, that's really a question for people like, how are you doing it today?
Mhm.
What do you use to measure to say this person is growing or they're not growing?
It looks like one of our challenges is an unwillingness to share that something they participated in was not of value to them at that point.
Hmm.
Checkpoint milestones is one measurement. How their behaviors change on the job, what impact they have on the business. That's a little bit. Peers and direct reports, how they present to their peers and direct reports. Yep. Thank you, everybody. And do you want to wrap us up with poll 9?
Yeah. Yeah, so the last question is, what type of business impact would you expect in order to justify investing in leadership development at your company?
I think this is interesting too. Alistair said that they use an ego development maturity model.
Interesting.
What type of business impact would you expect in order? What do you anticipate some of the answers would be?
Yeah, I'm going to be interested to see if anybody talks about kind of referring back to some of the capabilities like execution. You know, would they expect leadership development would aid in, you know, setting vision and direction or execution or decision making? Is the communication within the company getting better? You know, is there more? I mean, one of the biggest ones is there more self-awareness? It's one of the first I think one of the first ones that has to happen before people can really be ready to know that there are some things I need to learn and grow in. If you're not aware of those deficiencies or those shortcomings, then it's going to prevent growth in the first place.
Absolutely. And Joshua said, whatever the K-Suite KPIs are, and Renee shared promoting internal versus external. So a couple good feedback there. Increased contributions through improved results for their area, mentoring others, smoother change implementations. This is great. And please feel free to keep chiming in as I start to wrap us up here, because I know we're coming up at the end of our time together. Time always flies by. But yes, feel free to keep plugging your responses into the chat. But in the meantime, I'd just like to take a moment to thank everyone for joining us for today's event, and a big thank you to you, John, for being here with us today. As well as, again, thank you to Audrey, Renee, Lori, and Josh for joining us for the conversation as well. And a huge thank you again to Sounding Board for its partnership in the development of this event.
That was great to be here. Thanks so much for having us.
Absolutely. A few quick things to wrap up. As I mentioned earlier, you will all receive an email in the next couple of days where we will share a recording of today's event, a transcript of the chat, a post-event survey, and certification codes. We do have 2 remaining Breakfast Club events coming up through the end of 2022. Our next Breakfast Club will take place November 30th, and it's titled The Key to Enterprise Agility, A Culture of Learning. And our final Breakfast Club of the year will be held December 14th. Spark Your Learners' Creativity. You can learn more about each of these events by visiting 2022breakfastclub.com, and you can also access on-demand recordings of each event upon its completion. We will also be bringing back this online Breakfast Club series in 2023, so stay tuned for more information about featured topics and speakers, which we'll be showcasing soon on our Breakfast Club site. In closing, thank you again so much for joining us today. We hope to see all of you again very soon. And in the meantime, please take care of yourselves, stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week.